certainly nice to, well, some of you I could see before, but certainly nice to be able to spend a few moments together with you. And we're going to take a look here, of course, at the challenge we all face today. And that is, how do you get good staff? How do you get good people? How do you ensure that you have an effective security team? And I think that for many of you, that's something that has been a challenge. So what do we look for? What are the things we can do that hopefully will help us to be able to have the right people, even though we face the problems of, one, finding people with the skills, but also having the budget and so on we would like to have as well. So my name is Kevin Henry, and we're going to take a look at this area here. I've been involved with readiness for, well, since its very beginning, and as one of their, we say, presenters, instructors, and so on. As well as before that, I was involved as the Vice President of Education at ISC2, and been quite involved with ISACA, the C-RISC, CISM, CISA, development of course materials and so on for ISACA directly as well. So, been at this game for a little while, and one of the things that I do want to start out by stressing is that your comments, your questions are very welcome, and at any time, just feel free to speak up, and if there's something that you would like to ask about and so on, or just add as well, that's very welcome, of course, because it's always good to get people's real experiences, people's, should we say here, different perspective, rather than just all, should we say here, hearing the same old one way to do things. Because there's one thing that's important, and that is that yesterday's solutions will not always be the right for today's challenges and today's problems. And that requires us to be innovative. It requires us to think of what are new ways to be able to address the challenges, the risks, and so on of today. And we've seen that as we've moved more in many cases to remote working. The problem with remote working is, how do we develop new staff? How do we really, because so much value came from those times that we were just standing around the coffee machine and the casual, informal interactions we often counted on. And I think that it makes it more difficult in a virtual world. And many people are more productive working virtually. They work the hours they would like in many cases. They're don't have to worry about commuting and parking and all this, and are a little bit more flexible in some cases. But on the other hand, some people don't work as well independently. And so a lot of the solutions to building a team also has to look at, what type of team are we going to have? Is it going to be partially virtual? Is it going to be partially, should we say, in an office every day, or a hybrid? And are we going to be able to find the people that are independent enough, but as well, we can say here, are able to still work as a team to reach what our, should you say, requirements and objectives and so on are. So anyway, it's when we take a look at the whole area here of building a team, I can give my own personal experience. I used to manage a security team, plus then when I was working for ISC2, I managed all of the instructors for the over 500 events we did a year for ISC2. And we would try to bring in new, should we say, instructors, new staff, And the big challenge with that in many cases was that uh, how do you find people that have the right mix of skills we need, that are able not only to be very knowledgeable, but also to be able to share that knowledge, that are able to communicate, that are able to interact, that are able to read the audience and be able to be flexible so that they could adapt to, so you see, the situation they're in. And so we would, when people apply to become instructors, we'd filter them out and try to find ones that looked like they'd be the best fit. But in many cases, if we could take one out of every 6 people we tried, and one of them worked out to be a very good instructor, that was actually pretty much the average. Even though we'd filtered out dozens before that. We'd bring 6 people in, we'd work with them, train the trainer, because it requires, every job requires unique skills. And we have to find for our teams who are the people that have those unique skills we need. And it's going to be different for one type of organization than another, obviously. And so we can say that the first step for all of us is really try to determine what our needs are. And I've come up with a little bit of a theme for this that maybe it's a bit hokey or something, but anyway, what does it take? The first thing it takes is to understand that security is not a department. We have seen this, that we can have a security team, and the challenge with the security team is that they often are not really a part of the business. They see themselves as maybe even an elite, an isolationist group, and that's not right. Security is not a department. Security is the way in which we should do business. And security should become embedded, or we could say integrated into each person that works in the business. And when I was appointed director of security for the company I worked for, it was a telco, one of the first things I did was I said, guys, get rid of your uniforms. Here they were wearing uniforms. I said, your security, you don't need to be walking around like you're a pretend policeman. No, you come in like everybody else in the company. You dress like they do. Certainly appropriate for business, but not in a way that you think you're some separate group. And it was interesting because I had been working in audit, and here I was asked to become the director of security, and they didn't appoint one of their own. The company did not choose one of the security officers to become the director. Why? Because they realized we needed a culture change. And so I said to them right away, I said, the other thing I want is that from now on, when you go for coffee, you go for coffee not as this group, but instead you go with, should you say, like everybody else, you go down, you pick up your tea, your toast, you sit at a table. And I said, I want you to start to interact with the other people, because the other people in the company are not the enemy. No, they are the people that make the company money. Without them, we don't have a company. We don't have a security department. And if those people that are working for the company see security as someone who's just there to get them in trouble, yeah, you're not going to be effective. We had a situation where it had a theft at one of our locations, and when we dealt with that, we then, I went back a short time after, because it's always good after something's happened to go back in a couple of weeks later and just see, has it healed? Or is it still red? Is it still festering? Is there still a problem here that maybe we didn't get to the root? And so I went in and one of the ladies that worked there said to me, she said, "Kevin, I'm really glad you dealt with this." I said, "Well, of course we'll deal with it. Like, we're, it's unfortunate when an employee does something that's wrong. And, uh, and, you know, that's our job to certainly try to have things as a good working environment." She says, "Yeah, we all knew he was stealing, but the problem was that we didn't know what to do about it. We couldn't go to the boss because the boss was a good friend of his." I said, "Well, it's too bad you didn't feel you could come to security." And she says, "Well, security in their perception was that security guard who worked for another company that sat at the front desk." And that's where I realized we needed to become more integrated, more so that people saw us as just another employee, not as some, should we say here, group of troublemakers. And so we need people with that attitude. We need people on our security team who are able to interact and who, for example, yeah, when you go for coffee, you actually come out of your shell and smile and say hello to the other people sitting around in the cafeteria. And um, just begin to realize that those people, they have car payments, they have mortgage or rent payments, they have kids in football and so on, just like you do. And then, of course, what happens is you get interaction and people start asking, okay, what is this about ransomware? What is this about a phishing attack? And so that we can become more effective. And I'm always glad when people come up to me and say, "I just got this email. What do you think?" That it's not such that they have to think that, boy, I'm going to think they're stupid for asking. The point, of course, is that to be an effective security team, we have to understand that we are a part of an organism, of an organization. And what we're trying to do is create so that everybody in the company now does things in a secure way. It becomes a habit. It becomes, well, just when we do something, we do it securely. And we can say here that what we're really trying to do is help with education so that people recognize that security, in many cases, it doesn't come down to what the security department does. Security really just comes down to what do they do every day. And that security is a part of their job. And we're just here to help them. So in some cases, I had people that worked in security that really were not suited for that role. They basically thought that they were kind of a policeman. And unfortunately, in many cases, the police are not respected by people because they don't interact well enough. And so anyway, um, finding people that wanted to, instead of be there to get somebody in trouble, find people that really, in many cases, wanted to help, wanted to educate, wanted to be a part of the organization. So it takes a village. It takes many people working together to be able to, of course, do a lot of these tasks and be an effective security team. But it also takes you. It takes you as a leader. It takes you as the person that others trust, that people would want to follow, that would. And the problem can sometimes be that a person has many of opinions, but do the others also sense from you a certain level of empathy, a level of understanding, a level, we could say here, of not that do as I say, but don't do what I do because I don't follow the rules myself. My father was a judge for many years, And I hated driving with him because he followed the speed limit exactly. And you all know that if you're going to take the highway from Malmo up to Gothenburg and you follow the speed limit, it's going to take a long time. Yeah. But I would say to him, like, the other cars are driving faster. Why don't you? He says, because I'm a judge. And how could I pass a sentence or a fine on somebody else if I don't follow the rules myself? So that was his approach. I don't drive the same way as he does. But the whole point is that we have to set a tone that the reason we do this is not to put on rules, but rather to protect. The reason we have controls is not to get you in trouble, but rather to help so you don't get in trouble. And so there's a lot about leadership here as well, that people know that as a leader of a security team, you're going to treat your own staff fairly. You're going to be reasonable. And of course, the challenge with so many of these cases is that people get all about, oh, these are the rules and we must follow these. But can I rather be someone who, as a leader of the team, the others know that if they've got a problem, they can come, we can talk about it. And quite frankly, one of the hardest things in our job is often when we're doing an investigation. We're doing an investigation, there's something that's gone wrong, and that can have a tremendous emotional impact on our staff. Yeah. And then to be, should we say, understanding. Realize that sometimes a person, when they've been investigating an employee or investigating a situation, they need some time to recover. And it's not just about enforcing the rules, but also having here a certain amount of, you say here, flexibility. How do we deal with things? How do we deal with our employees? How do we deal with our team? And of course, a big part of that is don't say something if you don't need to say it. I really much appreciate when we go into meetings and some people, oh, in a meeting, they talk and talk and talk. And everybody's sort of sitting there wishing, I wish they'd stop. We've heard this before, we're going to hear it again. And a lot of cases with that is that people tune out and they're frankly not even listening anyway. What do you want? You want to build a rapport with the organization so that you, as a security person, when you're coming into a meeting, maybe you don't say a lot, but at the end, maybe the project lead comes back to you and says, so tell me, do you have any concerns? Are there things from a security perspective we have to really pay attention to? So they're actually, instead, they respect and value the contribution you bring as well. So, and the other thing too, it's really good to learn to say thank you. It's really good to be appreciative. When a person's put in an extra effort, it doesn't take a lot just to say, hey, I saw that what you did with that was well done. And of course, when we also are appreciative, it also gives us, in many cases, a better chance to be able to provide instruction, provide guidance, and so on as well. So it takes a leader, it takes you. And of course, when we're going to look, we can say here, at building a security team, it really takes a team. We can't, it's the same as, for example, if we're going to play football, you can't have 10 strikers. If we're going to play ice hockey, you can't have, 9 goalies. No, you need to have different skills. Those who are more offensive, those who are more defensive, those who are playmakers, those who are able to contribute in different ways. And so we have to, in many cases, encourage that we bring together the various skills we need, which includes technical skills. And some of the best technical people are not always the best at communicating. And we still have to be able to welcome them into the team because of their technical expertise. On the other hand, we need people that can communicate, people that can work with the business, and as of course, when we're dealing with some types of situations, there are certain personalities that are far better than others. And to try and make sure we find the right people if we're going to have to do an investigation. You don't want it to be a person, and I had one person who worked with me who said, if we're dealing with any type of an investigation where there's been bullying or there's been abuse, she didn't want to be involved. And that's fine. I understood that. And I never asked her and never would ask her why, but you can assume something. But she knew that, and she told me, she says, in a situation like that, I cannot be impartial. I cannot just be clinical and professional. And so we have to find who can be the right ones. I had one guy that really wanted me to teach him how to do interviews. And I said, the most important thing in an interview is to listen, not to talk. We see that very often when there's been interviews, that the interviewer actually shared more information than the person they're interviewing. And instead of really hearing what that person had to say, they rather talked about what they thought and how they thought it. Yeah. And it completely derailed. The purpose of an interview is to gather information, to get that person to open up and speak. And that requires us to have a certain, shall we say, way to be able to bring that person into feeling comfortable talking with us. And that's why also when we interview, you never put a table in the middle of the room and sit on opposite sides of the table. That's a barrier. You're on your side, I'm on my side. No, when we do interviews, we can have a table against the wall so we can put papers and so on. But when we're interviewing as part of an investigation, it's not like TV shows where it's always the guys in this hard wooden chair and we intimidate and bully the person and so on. No, we sit in similar chairs and that person always sits closest to the door. Why? Because we're not police officers. And we cannot have them say they were trapped in that room. What do you mean we were trapped? You were the closest to the door. We can't hold a person if they don't want to talk to us. There's other steps we can do, of course, but the challenge for us is we don't want to get to that. We don't want it to be confrontational. Say, look, we have to get some information here, and we're just talking about this, and invite them to open up. But the important thing is when we ask questions, to listen to what they say and to proceed. But too many people, when they start hearing something, they right away have to say something as well. And so this one guy, he really wanted me to teach him some good interview skills, but he was not able to be quiet. He was not able to sit there sometimes when it's uncomfortable and just listen and let that person, you've asked the question, because he was, in this case, the observer. He wasn't I asked the question. He used to sit there quietly and not say a word. That's the rule of the observer. They take notes, but they don't say anything. And so anyway, I asked a difficult question, and the person was, you could tell they were a little bit uncomfortable. And we give them time. But no, he had to speak up. And I said, what you did was, instead of hearing what that person had to say, we heard your opinion and we didn't need that. And so there are times we have to know when to speak up, but there's also times we have to know when to be quiet. And we need to, in many cases, develop different skills. And it is important, too, that we have that right attitude with all of this, that We want to be professional, accurate, thorough, and not such that we are trying to prove our theory. The reason I wrote attitude on here is because of a really good experience I had. We were looking for a technical person, actually. And one of the people that applied for this, well, she'd been an administrator at Oxford University, and so she had some technical skills, but certainly not to the in-depth forensics we are looking for. But in the interview, she demonstrated attitude. She demonstrated that keenness, that willingness to learn, that hunger to become a better professional. She was hired above people that had more technical skill. Why? Because we knew that what she didn't know, she could learn. She already had the most important thing, and that was the right attitude, the right approach. And so we also have to look at that way as well. Do we find people who they may not be the best yet, but they're the ones that will really become a part of the team? And if we look at that football analogy, for example, we know that when Sir Alex Ferguson allowed David Beckham to leave and so on, he said one of the reasons was because David Beckham thought he was bigger than the team. And we saw that with Vincent Lombardi, the person that in the United States, the Super Bowl trophy is named after, the great coach of the Green Bay Packers. And the first thing he did when a new player came into the dressing room, then he had a meeting with them and he said, look, he says, you are privileged to become a Green Bay Packer. It's not that the Green Bay Packers is necessarily privileged to have you. We are glad to have you. But you are part of a team. You're part of a culture that existed before you came and will continue after. Your role is how well you add value to this team. That's where we have to look for attitude, not look necessarily for arrogance. But the other thing too is as a security leader, we have to be really careful that we don't just bring in people that think like we do. I call these chickens. And sometimes you'll see a manager walk down the hall of an office, and that manager always has 3 or 4 chickens that follow along. Yes, sir. Yeah, you're right, sir. Yeah, absolutely, sir. No problem. Yeah, good idea, sir. And all they do is basically reinforce the manager without ever challenging. Instead, we want to have people on our team that are willing to question. Respectfully, of course. We can all work respectfully and not necessarily agree. We can, and sometimes have to make a decision that our staff doesn't agree with. But at least, hey, once we've come to a consensus, once we've come to a decision, we expect everyone to follow along with that and not work to undermine it and so on. So it's easy for weak managers to collect chickens, to collect people that just support them. And just in some ways, the problem is if somebody comes with any type of a contrary opinion, then all of those chickens, they begin to squawk and they flap their feathers, and that so that the manager doesn't even hear. And that, of course, means that manager, instead of being able to make informed decisions, just a second. The manager is stuck making a decision based on a very biased, incomplete set of data. So it does take a team, a good team. Now, there are other things too we could put in here, and that is it takes the whole company. It takes a community. It takes that we can convince people why security is important. We get buy-in from senior management, obviously, by communicating what value did you bring. And a big part of that is being able to show what have we done with the budget we've had. The reality I like to say is you'll never have enough money and you'll never have enough time. But does that mean we become frustrated and do nothing? No. It means we have to show what have we done with the inadequate budget we have. And that is demonstrating to management, demonstrating to the employees. When you do security awareness, you just say, do you know that this is the number of attacks we had against our firewall in the past week? And a lot of the employees can think, yeah, do we ever get attacked? It's all theory and so on. No, when you come out with a reality, not to create fear, but rather to create value perception. What did we actually do? And be able to share that so that people recognize that as a security team, we're in the front line of helping protect their jobs. We are there to help ensure that they'll still get a paycheck next week and we won't end up the victim of a ransomware attack that causes the company to, should we say, falter. Yeah, we get buy-in. Then, of course, it's good to explain why do we do things. Why are the things that we put in certain controls and some limitations, and why do we allow this and not allow that? Because we're not dealing with children when you say it's time to go to bed. Why? Because it's time to go to bed. No, we're dealing with adults that we have to explain to them the reason that we have a password on the system, the reason we do multi-factor authentication, and the reason that you wear your ID card clearly displayed at all times, and the reason that. So we explain so that they understand that this isn't just a useless rule, but there are very real, should we say, fundamental risks that justify that rule. It could have rewards. Sometimes to just go around, and whether that reward is something like a thank you, or whether or not it's something that we even hand out, should we say here, even lanyards or something for Security Awareness Week, or we do little things to show that we're contributing, and that in some cases, some people love, we call it swag, the little gifts you get, whether it's a lanyard for your ID card, or whether it's a pen that says security is all about you. Some people love that, some people hate it. But we have, of course, a lot of our security awareness is based on a variety of different ways to share information and a variety of approaches that we can appeal to different people and different people's hot buttons, as we call it as well. And of course, it can sometimes be good to use examples. This is what happened to other companies in our industry sector. This is what's happened, and I often like using real examples. And the one I put in here, Boots. A sad situation I dealt with is that we had an employee that every year we had an allowance to buy safety equipment. You could buy boots and hard hats and so on. And so, but the auditors came through and found out that one of the employees, he normally wore a size 45, but this year he bought a size 38. And so the auditor came across to him and said, could we see those boots you bought a month ago? Because we want to see how you, that obviously wear a size 45, how did you buy a size 38? And then he had to admit that, well, he used his boot allowance to buy boots for a friend. And we said to him, you can't do that. Your safety equipment allowance is for you, not to turn around and use it for other people. And uh, we had a little bit of disciplinary action then related to that. But the whole point was that when we actually, in our awareness, said, like, here's just an example, we of course didn't use any names, but don't risk your job for, you know, 1,000 crowns worth of safety boots. That's not worth it. It's good to use examples and to make it real that, you know, it's, we don't want to get you in trouble. So here's things to watch out for. And anyway, it also, when you're looking for people, we said look for skills, yes. But I think there's something that really comes in here that's so important, and that is look for passion. Look for people that really want to do this. Now, passion is not enough. It could be that I really, really want to be a great football player or a great golfer. And believe me, I'm not a good golfer. I can be passionate, I can study, I can practice, but I'm still never going to be a threat to Tiger Woods. There also needs a certain level of skill, a certain amount of talent. And so we need to find people that have a balance here that's not just passion, but also do have a talent. And I remember one instructor, especially we were working with, and I liked him as a person, and he really, really wanted to become a good instructor, but I'd given him a couple of chances, and I had to say, I'm sorry, you're just not cut out for this. And we can have the same thing. We find a person, we're going to do, you know, teach them how to investigate, how to look into a situation. Yeah. And we find out, you know, something, as much as you really want this, it's just not the right fit for you. But the fact is, I don't want someone who just necessarily has skills but hates their job. You want a passion, you want an interest. And of course, beyond that, there's one thing that I think that's really important. I was teaching a class yesterday evening for, well, Boeing aircraft. And they give all of their employees the ability to take courses on their own time, but they pay for them. And it's always, to me, encouraging when we see people do that. The point is that the company says, we're not going to, you know, basically let you be in courses every day, but if you want to improve yourself, yeah, we'll pay. And you can use some company time, but primarily you're also going to have to give a little bit of your own. And I think that's very wise. Do people want to learn? Do you want to grow? I dealt with people who said, you know, I'm paid for what I know. I've been here for 18 years. So I'm paid because I'm so knowledgeable. And I said, actually, no. Were you paid last Friday? Yes. Then as of last Friday, you and the company were even. You'd been paid for everything you did up until last Friday. Today, on Thursday, why should you get paid? Not for what you did 10 years ago, but for what you do today. What value do you bring today? I said, the problem is that you graduated from university in 2005. And guess what? That's how current your knowledge is. And now in 2026, the knowledge you had when you left university is almost irrelevant. Because we're not dealing with a 2005 world, we're dealing with a 2026 world. What you need is to keep learning, keep growing, not to sort of say, well, I graduated and I've worked at this for a long time. I said, if I took someone who graduates next month from university and they have passion, they have a foundation of learning, that they have gone through university and passed the tests. Yeah. I said, they could be probably almost as good as you in 6 months, which means that your true level of knowledge is basically 6 months worth of knowledge. Because you've been here 18 years, you've repeated 36 times. No, we have to gather a team that hopefully is interested in learning. And I think certification is a very good indication that the person's not just taking courses, but rather they're really proving through, whether it's an ISC2 course, the CISSP, or whether or not it's through an ISACA, CISM, CISA, C-RISC, they've proved through a third party they actually have real actionable knowledge. Because one of the great things about all of those certifications is that they are not based on, we can say here, just knowledge. They're based on the application of knowledge. And therefore, when a person has passed a CISSP, they've proven that they have a good knowledge of information security, but they know how to use that knowledge as well. So sometimes certifications can be a good indication where a person has taken the extra step. They've actually not just, well, gathered knowledge, but they've proven that knowledge. Now, having a CISSP does not make you a better security person, does not guarantee it, but it can very much help. Why? Because by going through that process, quite often we find there's little gaps, there's little things that it added in. There's other things that we learned that, of course, are really valuable for us. And we can say here, in a lot of cases, sometimes certification is that first filter. If we have 10 people apply for the job, then we ask, okay, do you have any certification? Have you done anything since you left university? And in some cases, people can say, yes, I have, or I took the course, or I didn't do the exam, or maybe even I failed the exam, that's fine. But they've shown some interest. And in some cases, what does that do? Of all of those 10 people, we can filter down to those who have taken the extra step. Now we interview and find out, do they really have valuable, useful knowledge, or have they merely passed a paper test? So certifications can be a good indication, we can say here. But it also takes security champions. It's not about a security department. It's about being able to integrate security into every area of the business. So we need to gather the people from the other departments, finance, sales, marketing, operations, that have an interest in security and develop them. They become a local representative. They become the security champion in their group that make sure that they have access to information about current trends. What are the threats with AI? What are the threats with, yeah. So we make that available so that we have advocates in all of the other departments as well. You'll never have enough people in the security team to do everything. So what do? Try to build, should we say here, that team of people outside that can certainly help here. And what do? They represent security. They also help us to hear what are the concerns, what are the things happening in their departments. Because communication should always go both ways. We share information, and they can also keep us updated with, so how are people reacting to multi-factor authentication? What are the challenges or the frustrations people are having? So that hopefully we can refine our processes, maybe even refine our policies, maybe refine in some cases our awareness programs to be more effective as well. But it is important to develop the technical skills. We need people that don't just know how to use a tool. Yeah, there's good tools out there. But actually know how to effectively use that tool in a creative way, that they are as determined to try to find a vulnerability as a hacker who's trying to break into our systems. We need to know the tools, the techniques used by the bad guys. We need to develop the skills to be able to, one, be able to probe and find or discover any vulnerabilities. But we also need those who are experts in breaking into web applications and finding any weaknesses in a web application. And those who are good at going through source code, going through, for example, and finding it. Is there a problem with our configuration? Is there a problem with my hardening of my system? These are various skills. As just with a football team, you need some people that are good at attack, some people that are good at defense, and some people we can say here that are just there as the last stop to make sure that the opposition doesn't win. So that requires, of course, the people that are diligent and the, should we say, and also provide people the training. As it's always been that saying, do you want to waste your money on training for people that might leave? Or do you want to not spend money on training and have the people stay? That's a really good question that we need to ask sometimes. Yes, we spent all this money training people, but guess what? They left. Yeah, that happens. But on the other hand, maybe we are able sometimes to attract people who come and say, hey, I want to work for that company because they'll allow me to get some training. They'll allow me to improve. So I don't go from being 25 years old as a graduate of university with my second or third job, and that I'm going to continue in this for the next 40 years until I can retire. No, we want to grow. We want to develop. We want to certainly, in some cases, maybe at one point we were working on the white team. We were going through, for example, our programs and our processes and finding it. But then we move over to a blue team or a red team, different skills. And of course, what's the great thing about that? They understand the other side of it as well. So we can say here, through all of this, hopefully the end result is you build a really good team, a team that can help you provide effective security. And that, of course, will hopefully protect the assets of your organization, protect people's jobs and so on as well. Any questions? Anybody still awake? So certainly there's one thing, of course, I do have to say, and that is keep learning. I love it. I love learning. I love, of course, ensuring that I'm always developing new skills. I'm 65 years old and I still sit for different certifications every year. And the reason I do that is because I don't want to stagnate. I don't want to, of course. So having things like an unlimited training license that lets you take as many courses you want, fantastic. The only problem is you'll probably have to listen to me again for some of them if you go to security. But it's an incredibly good offer. The fact is you can take 2 or 3 certifications for the cost of one. And it's good to have that option available for you as well. And of course, we have that both in the security field as well as, of course, in the Microsoft field as well. So to all of you, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to sit, discuss some of these important issues, and hopefully you found something useful that you can use as well.